Hi, welcome to the next section of our tutorial on this web development with C#. You can see in front of us the example that we're going to end this video with. So we are going to take our existing project and add some pictures, as you can see here. We're going to change the table from a table view into a grid view so that when we resize the browser, we should be able to see a flexbox kind of a style. So we can see multiple rows and each item in the row has its own photo. Also, you notice these strange rectangles with the dotted lines around the edge. So we're going to talk about layouts and how they are designed here. Some of the resources that we're going to explore here include a customized Bootstrap theme called Bootswatch, and you can see here the superhero theme is the one I've selected. It's slightly different than the normal. Also, we're going to be using a icon placeholder called Pravatar, so you can see that with a few lines of code you can have a random picture, and these only work for human faces, but if we wanted to have products, there's another placeholder tool called lorem flicker. So lorem ipsum is the Latin placeholder text that you often see in projects. So lorem flicker is using the Flickr website to use appropriate pictures for placeholders as well. So those are some of the things that we're going to see in the next part of our tutorial. So let's switch over into Visual Studio now and look at the application as we finished it in the last video. So just a quick review of what we've designed so far. You can see on the screen here I have a table for the products. And if we were to look in the data in here, you would see that there are 1,000 products that we created from the Macaru website, and so we have names, prices, and descriptions for each product. Over here in the code, we have a model called the products model, which shows that it has all of the items that correspond to the columns in the database. For the controller, we have a products controller. We designed two different things to show the products. One was the index, which shows all of the products, and then we have a search results, which allows you to display only a filtered list, so you can search for a specific type of food in our case. And then over here in the services folder, we have a section called the iProducts data service, which was an interface that allows us to define what all of the actions are in a data service. And then the most current version that we're working with right now is a database connection. So it allows us to get all the products out of the database as well as search for products using this method here, giving a search term. And so those are all of the pieces that have been put together. So we're going to take from this point in our application forward. So if you haven't seen the last video, then go ahead and check that out before you continue. So most of the work we're going to do in this lesson is with the front end. So you can see the current version of the application is up on the screen here, and this is our starting point. We have a table that shows all of the columns of each product, and then we're going to change this into what you saw earlier, which is a customized view for Bootstrap, so the CSS will change. We're going to switch from a table view into a grid view with a bunch of cards, which is also a component of Bootstrap. And then I'm also going to show you how to customize the layout so you can have a more modular approach to building your site. So mostly front-end work is what you're going to see here. So let's explore what the layout design of a project is. So I'm going into the folder under Views called Shared, and I'm looking at Layout. So Layout is a shared file that is displayed on every single request that you make for the application. So you'll notice here several things. First of all, there is mostly HTML content in this page. However, down here on line 40, we have a section with an @ symbol. So that is a rendered piece of code. It says render body. So all of the custom tables and views and input forms are all going to show up in this body section. Above that, we have a section that is called the nav bar. And so the nav bar is shared among all pages on the application. If you look down a little further, you're going to see that there is a section here at the bottom for scripts. And if we wanted to make a separate folder for or a separate file for footer, we would remove this. So what I want to do here is to do a couple of things. I want to show you how to make a modular piece that can be included in another file, and then we're going to modify the CSS so that we can see where these boundary lines of each section are. So let's start with the nav bar. I'm going to cut out all of the pieces that start from nav and end at the nav. So this here looks like it's a logical unit. So let's go right click on this and choose cut. And of course the header now is completely empty. So what we need to do is make a new file and put the nav bar there. So let's go over to the shared folder and do a right click and choose new or add, and we're going to add a new view. So when I choose the new view, I'm going to choose an empty view. There's really no models involved here. It's just HTML code. We're going to use the word underscore navbar for the file name. So underscore indicates that it's a partial view. It's a piece of a larger page. And then once we get to the page here for navbar, I can delete all of the items that are there and simply press the Control V for paste. So all of the navbar code now is here. So let's just click the Save button. But we need to include this now back in the main layout. So the command that I'm looking for is called @html.partial. So partial means include a partial page here on this a specific place. So the partial page that I'm including is the navbar, of course. So in the string inside of the parentheses, we have to put underscore navbar.cshtml. And so that will render this portion of the page. So let's run the program again. And hopefully you see no changes whatsoever. So if I have the same product search and all of the features that are there before, the only thing we've done differently is that we've taken the navbar and put it into a separate file, so now it can be included as part of a partial render. So it's really not so much for the aesthetics here, but for management. So if you wanted to make some customizations to the navbar, you've got one file to work on. It makes the layout file shorter, which is a common strategy when you're designing software, is to split out modules into smaller pieces so that way you have smaller files and easily located places that you need to update. So I'm going to close this and let's go and make some changes. What I'm going to make now is I'm going to show you a border line. So around the header area, we're going to put a dotted line just to style it. And then in the main area, we're also going to put a dotted line. So the areas that I'm interested in styling are here. So we have header, and we have the main section, and then we also have a footer down here that we can also include. So let's go find out where you can style things and override the defaults. So if you look over in the folder called www.root and expand that, you will see a section called CSS. And we also have a file here called site.css. So all of these here are where you can override the usual Bootstrap styles. So right at the top of the page, I'm going to include 3 new sections. So we're going to style the header, the main, and the footer as 3 different parts. So for each of these, I'm going to make a border. So let's type in border with 3 pixels of width, style is dashed, and then I'm going to pick a color such as red. And I'll copy and paste this for the other 2, and we'll pick some horrible colors like green and orange to override these. So this isn't meant to be pretty, it's meant to be instructive. Let's see what it looks like when we run it. So you can see that the page is up and running, and you see absolutely no changes to the style. I was expecting to see some borders that are red, green, and orange. If you press the refresh button, you may get those changes to update. You may not. The styles are often cached in the browser, so I'm going to hold my Shift key down and click the refresh button again, and this time you can see the styles show up. So sometimes you have to force your browser to go back to get a fresh copy of the CSS. So the red border at the top indicates that's the header section of the page. The green is for the main, and then down at the bottom you can see an orange section for the footer. So like I said, these are not meant to be pretty, they're meant to be instructive. So now if you were to look at a section that has like products, the main area, the green area, will be much larger because we're including a very large page. So this, I think, has 1,000 items in it, so we'd have to scroll down quite a ways before we reach the footer. And there is 1,000 products. So obviously not a good design. You might want to split that up into pieces and have tabulation. But anyway, this gets you a pretty good view of the sections. So why do we do this? It's because we want to see that the layout is the kind of the master plan, and then the modules all kind of fit inside of that. So the borders tell you where those regions lie. So let's go back into the CSS folder and we'll explore some more. So the CSS has only one file to style the whole page. Well, actually, we've got a lot more than that. So if we look down in libraries or lib, you'll see that there are other folders under there. So Bootstrap is the one we're interested in, and we have a distribution folder. Let's open that. And then we have another CSS, and then we have this Bootstrap CSS, which actually has some information in it. So this here is the predefined styles that you get from the Bootstrap CSS framework. So if you were to browse through here, you'd get an idea of the extensive styling that has been done here. So you can see that there are fonts for practically everything that you can imagine on a page. Their colors and their alignments. So a lot of work has been done for you, and that's why Bootstrap is pretty standard, because there's a lot of things that you don't have to worry about. So this one here is the Bootstrap CSS file. If you open up the little triangle, you can see that there's something called Bootstrap min. Let's open up that. And why do we have a min version? Well, you can see the min version has been minified. So all of these spaces and indents and lines have all been squished together into one long string. So the computer doesn't mind having a non-formatted page to look at. It's just as easy for the computer to interpret that. But for us humans, obviously, we want to see some indents. Now, why would they make a minified version? Well, simply, it's to save file space so your web page loads faster. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to replace this file here, this min file, with a different template. And let's go ahead and close this. I want to look back at the layout file and see where we're including these items. So if you look on line 7 says we are going to include a style sheet. It's found in the current directory, the lib folder, Bootstrap, distributions, CSS, Bootstrap min CSS. So that's the whole pathway to find this file. So I'm going to do some renaming here and then download a different version of this. So I'm going to first of all rename this one here as Bootstrap and then put in a hyphen original. So we know that we're dealing with the original version of Bootstrap. Now, this will break this function right here because we've renamed the file. Obviously, it can't load if it's named something else. So let's go find something else and put it in its place. So what I'm going to put into its place is some free themes for Bootstrap. So we have Boot Swatch here, and this here is a whole bunch of different themes. So I'm just going to pick from the themes menu. Let's see if I chose darkly. And you can see that this would be the version that would be replaced. Go ahead and pick any one of these themes that you like. They're all basically colors and maybe a little bit different on fonts. They're not horribly different than what you saw before, but obviously a different style. So Minthly is this one. So for my example, I'm going to choose Superhero. I think I kind of like that one. It was easy on the eyes. So how do you use this if you want to change your fonts? So to download this theme now, I'm going to the menu with the name Superhero and choose Bootstrap min CSS. That's the one that is downloaded here. So I have downloaded, it looks like a couple of times before, so it's got a number 2 in it. All right, so switching back into Visual Studio, I'm going to browse for that folder that I just downloaded. So Downloads folder, and at the top of my list I have Bootstrap min, so let's copy him. Do a right click and copy, and then come over to the CSS folder and right click and paste. Okay, so now I have the Bootstrap min with a 2 after it. Yours might not need that 2, but anyway, I'm going to rename it so it matches the original. So bootstrap.min.css. All right, so that should be in place, and I'm going to run the application and see what changes have occurred. So here's the app. It's up and running again, and no changes have taken effect. So I'm going to try refreshing and see if that makes any difference. It doesn't, so I'm going to hold the Shift key down and refresh. And this time, hopefully, the new theme takes effect. It does. So now I have the dark theme here for Superhero. Looks like my navbar is still kind of light. So let's see if I can maybe modify that a little bit. Let's go back into the navbar folder and see what we can change. So the navbar item was down here in the Views section. And let's double click it. So all of these items that you see in the class names are all specific to Bootstrap. So you have to use the Bootstrap website to know which ones that you pick from. So they have a whole style associated with navbar, and they have one here called navbar light. I think I can just replace light with something else. So it looks like we have navbar dark as one of my choices. And then there was also a background. So BG white. Let's see if there was another option there. And I could do any of these. So let's try dark. Okay, so I'm selecting navbar dark with a background dark. Now, like I say, the only reason that these work is because all of the CSS tags in that big min file that we just downloaded are already defined. So if you had to design your own classes, you would name them whatever you want. The Bootstrap names are the ones that are predefined for us here. So let's run this again and refresh the page. All right, so now you can see we have a new navbar. And if I hover, you can see these words. So it looks like we still need some work to do. These menu items are not obvious to work with anymore because they're actually invisible once the new superhero theme has taken place. So you may have different results with different themes that you choose, but explore the site and see what you can find. So if you want to know information about how Bootstrap works, you go to their website called getbootstrap.com, and you can select different components. So if you want to changes your navbar, they have examples here, and then they have different fonts and different colors and backgrounds and search buttons. So it's pretty much copy and paste. And all of these color schemes, as I mentioned, are all of these predefined words like this, right? I just chose right here, navbar, dark, BG, dark, and you can pick some of these guys if you like. So lots of options. You just have to go through the documentation to pick the ones that you like the best. Now coming back to the layout file, there's other files that have been included that we should notice. So notice here that the site CSS file is included in our header. So it is important that site CSS follows Bootstrap because the last person to load gets the precedent. So if you override anything from Bootstrap in the site file, your changes will take effect because they were loaded second. Notice at the bottom there's some script ideas. So these here are also like CSS. These are JavaScript things. So Bootstrap requires jQuery to run properly. And then here's the Bootstrap file that will run the JavaScript things. So some of the animation effects and modal dialog boxes are required to run in JavaScript. And then also if you want to do your own JavaScript, there's a file called site.js. And so all of that is found over here in the folders under www root. So these are equally customizable according to your needs. So just everything you know about CSS and HTML applies here, even though we're working in a C# program. Now you have other choices besides Bootstrap if you like. However, Bootstrap is the default installation in C# applications. So here's one, Foundation. And you can see that the idea is the same. You're supposed to have a bunch of predefined things that are going to make your website look good. So a little bit different style. Here's another popular one, Materialize. And you get different styles and different CSS items just like you do with Bootstrap. This one here I think is a Google product. And then if you look, here's another example of pure.css. Same idea where you've got different fonts and different colors and styles. So all of these are frameworks for CSS where a lot of the predefined work makes your job easier. So in the classes that I teach, Bootstrap is the most common framework for CSS that we work with. Number one, it's the most common framework for CSS by far. I mean, it's like not even close. Everyone uses and knows about Bootstrap. Number two, when you create a C# application with the ASP.NET framework, as we are working here in Visual Studio, it assumes that Bootstrap is what you're going to use. So to pick some of these other ones would take a lot of work. You'd have to change all of the default names in the styles. So Bootstrap is just easy by a couple of ways. So now in our application, we're going to get rid of the table and we're going to create a grid. And I'm going to have a grid of cards. So I'm going to the Bootstrap documentation and looking at card to see what a card looks like. So a card is a container that is just like you would expect a card with a picture, a title, and then a button on it. So we're just going to copy and paste the code from here. So there are different kinds of cards. You could have cards with pictures, without pictures, with buttons. So this one here is a little bit more elaborate. I'm going to pick the default card at the beginning, and let's see where that one is. So I can click the copy button here, and then I'm going to go into my one of my views. So I'm switching back into Visual Studio here, and I'm going down to the products folder under views and looking for the index file. So the index file is the file that is used to display the table of products. So you can see right what's going on here. We have a table with a bunch of headers and everything else. So this is nice, works great, but I'm going to delete everything except for the first link that says create new. So deleting. So now the table is gone. I'm going to press Control V and paste in the card. So that'll display one default card. Well, obviously we're going to have to loop through a whole bunch of things and display the cards one by one. So the first thing I want to do is set up a container around the group of cards. So a container in Bootstrap is a section that is automatically responsive to the width of your website. So that's an advantage of using a CSS framework, is that you don't have to worry about setting up the tablet version, the phone version, and the computer version. Bootstrap takes care of all of that responsive design for you. So you've seen it jump from like a single column of items to multiple columns depending on how big your browser is. That's a lot of work to think about when you're designing CSS. Bootstrap and the other frameworks take all that and turn it into a single command like this, where I say class equals container. Now I'm going to add two more items called d-flex and flex wrap, which makes this into a flexbox container. So automatically shuffles around a number of cards on each line. Now I need to go through and treat each card as a separate product. So I'm going to set up a for loop. And I'm going to say for each, and I'm going to define the item as the counter variable. And then it says for item in model. So model is obviously the list that's on line 1. So we have a list of products. And so I'm going to do this card, one for each item in the model. So the next things that I'm going to do is swap out some of the placeholder text with the actual values of each item. So let's start with the card title. Instead of the title, we'll change this to @item, which is the variable that's in the loop counter. And I'm going to pick the name for the text there. So the title is the text of the object here. And then we've got the price tag. So let's put the price in. And I'm going to copy and paste this and add another section for text and call it the description. So all of the items that are in the contents of the database should be displayed one per card. Now I'm going to make one modification here to the price. So remember, the price is supposed to have a $sign on it. If I just put the price here, I'm going to get a decimal number. I'm more interested in getting the formatted version. So I'm going to replace this with html.displayFor and then make a small function in here, an arrow function. So some variable m is going to render the price of the item. And the properties of the price tag will automatically show up as $sign formatted. All right, it looks like the app is up and running. So now let's go up to the nav bar and find products and see what happens. So now you can see that I have a bunch of cards. So they don't look quite like I expected. They've got some problems. So first of all, you can see that the image caption is not working. We've got ourselves a broken picture link. Obviously, I didn't include any pictures yet. And it looks to me like I have a orphaned /p tag in after the description, so I can fix that. But the general idea is pretty good. You can see all of the cards are displaying 3 per row. If I were to expand this to a larger size, it doesn't quite get more than 3 per row, but I was hoping it would. Anyway, we've got a bunch of cards. Let's fix these issues, and then we'll come back and try it again. So let's go back into the code and see if we can fix some of this. So we've got ourselves the orphaned p tag here at the end. Let's take him out. So the description now doesn't include that. And then the image doesn't seem to work. So let's put something in here for the source of the image rather than just a broken tag. So the first way that I'm going to include a image for each item is to go to this Pravatar CC website. So if you want a random Pravatar, you can just, like for instance, copy this code here. If you want to have a single unique one, then you can add a item called u equals and then some number. You can put any number there you want, but if you're consistent, that number will always stay the same. So let's copy one of these for the unique ID. And it looks to me like we're going to have 150 pixels as the size of our item. So I'm going to copy that, and let's switch back into our code. And where it says source and those 3 dots, I'm going to take out the 3 dots and paste in the new guy. So we don't want to have the same picture for every item. So the u equals is going to go away. And now I'm going to replace that with some unique number. Does our product have a unique number? It certainly does. So if I put in an @ symbol and put in item dot, and I could use ID as a unique number. So we've got ourselves item, and there's supposed to be a period. And let's see, get all this correct here. There. So item ID will now place its point here. So the alt, I'm not going to change anything there. Let's see what happens. We run it. Okay, so it looks like the app is up and running now. Let's go ahead and choose the item for products here. And let's see what kind of cards come out. So you can see that Pravatar is indeed generating a random avatar. So each one of these products now has a human face. Now, human faces are great if you're trying to create user objects. However, I think I'm more interested in product objects. So let's use a different avatar maker. So let's switch to this website here called Lorem Flickr. It allows you to put in a description, and it will pull out a picture from the Flickr website, and you can put it into your items. So let's take a look at some examples. So down here we can see if you wanted to have, for instance, a dog or something from Paris, you could do that. So let's copy this example of Paris and see if we can make that work. We're going to have to modify the code a bit, but this is kind of an adventure in coding. So let's switch back into our application here, and I'm going to get rid of the avatar items and the item ID as well. I'm going to paste in our new example. So this is 320 by 240. I think I'm more interested in squares. So let's go with the 150 again. So let's do 150 by 150. Now, instead of Paris, I need to have a single word. So let's go ahead and add that. Now, the first thing that comes to mind is, well, I have a title for this item. It's called the name. So I could put in item.name instead of Paris. So each item does have a name. However, I think you're going to see that this might not have the effect that we want. So let's run it and see what happens. All right, so the app is up and running again. Let's go ahead and choose products and see what comes out. So we do indeed get some pictures here. I'm not sure why we get the same picture for every item. So we need a few changes here. I think it's because we're looking at a very broad name here. So it has like soup and 4 other letters to follow it, or 4 words to follow it. I just want to use the first word and ignore the others. So we're going to have to do some coding. So now let's do some calculations. So first of all, I'm going to assign a variable s, just call it the item.name. So it's just a simple variable name swap. Then I'm going to create another variable called first word. And I want to do a check to see if there's a space in the name. So I think there's a space in almost everything, but just in case there's not, I'm going to check to see if the space exists. So if the index of space is greater than -1, that means it found someplace along the line in the string that there is a space. Then I'm going to take the substring. If the substring from 0 to the first space is found, that's the first full word. And if there was no space, then I'm just going to take the s. So this is a ternary operator to say if one is true, then take the first example, and then if not, then take the example after the colon. So this will give us a single word. And then I'm going to substitute that as the item that I'm going to pick from the icon chooser. So now check it out. So if I just use a single word, such as my example for the first one is beans, I get a picture of beans. Asparagus, for some reason, shows up as a blender. Bread, looks like a bread store. Trout. This must be a bird fishing for trout. So the words kind of match the pictures. Not exactly, but they're pretty close. So if you wanted to come up with a catalog, this would work. Now, if I press the refresh button and display, I think I'll probably get different results the second time around. So let's just check that out. Yeah, so I refresh the page and beans now shows up as a completely different photo. So I'd kind of like to have that as a static choice. I don't care which photo it picks, but every time I show this beans, I want to see the same picture. So is there an option for that? It turns out there is an option to lock in a picture, so that way it always is consistent. Let's scroll down a bit, and here it is, lock it. Lock it real good. So if you put in the word lock equals and then a number, then you're going to have that same picture every time you choose the same number. So it doesn't matter which number you pick. So you could pick number 212, but the first time it picks a picture, it'll give you the same picture as the second time you choose that. So refreshing the browser will keep a consistent look. So let's add a lock equals something, and that should make it more consistent. So adding one more item down here. So after the first word, we're going to put in a question mark and paste, and lock equals. Now I don't want it to be always 212. I want it to be the number of the ID. So let's put in @ symbol, item, and put in ID is our choice. So this will lock it in with the ID number. Let's try it one more time. Okay, we're going to run this again. So let's bring up the products, and let's see what images show up now for each of my food items. Okay, it looks like I've got myself pictures here. So random pictures that have been chosen for me, but I want to make sure that these are the same. So it looks like coffee beans were the first item, or is that chocolate beans maybe? Let's see what happens when I refresh. So it looks to me like the pictures are reloading as the same choice as they were before. So it's kind of slow. I've got 1,000 items on the page, and I'm really hitting up their server. So I don't want to do this too much and abuse my privileges of getting their free service. So let's move on to the next part. So one final thing to be nice to our users. The alt text for an image should be a description or some kind of a caption, so people that are visually impaired can actually understand what's on your page. Because if they were to look at the page now, they would have some kind of an automatic text reader tell them what the picture is, and it would just say card image cap. And can you imagine the computer saying that in a computer voice 1,000 times for the poor blind person? So let's give them a little bit more help. Instead of card image cap, let's put in something that would help them out. So item.name would be a perfect thing that would match the picture. Let's just check to see if that's working. Okay, I've got the application running, so let's go ahead and choose the products and see if we can see the same pictures, and now with an alternate caption. Okay, it looks like it's still loading the pictures fine. So now if I go to the photo and I see, is there any way to see the caption? Probably the only way you would do that is if you were to inspect it. So let's right click and choose inspect. So this brings up the inspection view so we can see each item. I'm going to select the arrow tool and then the first item on the page. You can see down here the alternative text is now here. Alt is beans, navy, dry in my case. Let's open the second one, and you can see we have asparagus Mexican. And so this here you might have not even realized is a feature if you're a normal sighted person. However, this is a great help if you are one, sight challenged, and then two, if you're a computer. So you think about how Google indexes everything on their website. So if you have a photo gallery with no alt text, Google really has no idea what that picture is supposed to be. And so this helps the search results of your page as well as people that need extra help with special needs. So make sure that you put an alt text in there that is appropriate to the photo that you've just placed. So that brings us to the end of this lesson here. So what's going to come next? So for each item in our database, we need to have an update. So right now we have this blue button that says go somewhere. If you click it, it doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't do anything. So we're going to have an edit button and a delete button. So that way we can do the full CRUD operations on the database. So create, update, delete, and details. So there we go. That's what's coming up next, is we're going to create some management for each of the products that we've created in our database. See you soon.